I am Dr. and welcome to AnewZ. Let's see the top stories. The Trump administration issues order to begin easing sanctions on Syria. EU trade chief says that the European Union is committed to securing a deal with the United States based on respect and not threats. 18 people were injured following a knife attack at Hamburg's Central Station. The Trump administration has issued orders to effectively lift sanctions on Syria, a move in line with the pledge President Trump made during his visit to the Middle East.
The United States government has announced orders to lift sanctions on Syria. This comes after U.S. President Donald Trump's pledge to unwind the measures during his visit to Saudi Arabia, where he met with Syria's interim president Ahmed al-Sharaa last week. The move is meant to help Syria recover from years of a devastating civil war that resulted in the ousting of former leader Bashar al-Assad. The U.S. Treasury Department has issued what it calls the Syria GL-25 license that will authorize transactions prohibited by the Syrian sanctions regulations and enable new investment and private sector activity. Additionally, the U.S. State Department has simultaneously issued a 180-day waiver under the Caesar Act, which, among other provisions, contains extensive secondary sanctions on non-U.S. entities facilitating transactions related to reconstruction in Syria. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said the waivers will facilitate the provision of electricity, energy and water and enable a more effective humanitarian response across the country. Syria's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has welcomed the decision, calling it a positive step in the right direction towards relieving humanitarian and economic suffering in the country.
President Donald Trump is threatening a 50% tariff on all European Union imports starting on June the 1st. He warned Apple, make iPhones in the United States or pay a 25% tariff.
US President Donald Trump is stepping up trade pressure on two major fronts, the European Union and tech giant Apple, sparking new worries in global markets. Trump recommended a steep 50% tariff on all imports from the European Union, starting June 1st. The move comes amid stalled trade talks with the bloc, which Trump accused of taking advantage of the United States. The White House says the tariffs aim to address the US trade deficit with the EU, which topped $235 billion last year. At the same time, Trump said Apple will face a 25% tariff on iPhones sold in the US that are not made in the country. He informed Apple CEO Tim Cook that iPhones sold in the US must be manufactured domestically, not in countries like India or Vietnam. The president insists that to avoid the tariff, Apple must bring manufacturing back home. Experts warn these tariffs could drive up prices, with iPhones potentially costing hundreds or even thousands more. Markets reacted immediately. Wall Street opened sharply lower on Friday. The Dow Jones dropped over 330 points, while the S&P 500 and Nasdaq each fell more than 1%. Apple shares were down 2.5% at the open. In Europe, officials responded cautiously but firmly. French Trade Minister Laurent Saint-Martin called Trump's tariff threat unhelpful to ongoing talks and said the EU is ready to respond if needed. Meanwhile, Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof expects a calm but firm reaction from the European Commission, which is scheduled to speak with US trade representatives later today. German Economy Minister Katharina Reich warned that trade conflicts hurt both sides equally and urged the European Commission to work toward a negotiated solution with the US-German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul said the European Commission has full backing from Berlin. He warned such tariffs would harm both economies and called for continued negotiations to protect the transatlantic trade relationship.
It is up to the European Commission to respond. It has our full support in maintaining our access to the American market, and I believe that such tariffs do not help anyone, but would only lead to economic development in both markets to suffer as a result. And that's why we continue to pursue negotiations and support the European Commission. We want to defend Europe and the European market while simultaneously exerting the power of persuasion in America.
The European Commission itself has asked for clarification on the tariff proposal before making any official response. As tensions rise, global markets are closely watching whether the EU and Apple will push back, and how these new tariffs could reshape global trade in the coming months.
The European Union's Trade Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič has vowed to defend the bloc's interest and has called for trade based on respect and not threats. This comes after President Donald Trump threatened to slap a 50% tariff on all goods sent to the United States from the EU. Šefčovič said the EU is fully engaged and committed to securing a deal that works for both parties. Trump earlier expressed impatience with the pace of ongoing EU-US trade negotiations, saying his plan to raise tariffs was set for the 1st of June. Explosions hit Ukraine's capital Kiev early on Saturday as air raid sirens echoed across the city. Several people were injured and buildings were damaged. Officials reported drone and missile strikes across multiple districts of Kiev overnight. At least 14 people were injured and emergency crews were deployed. Russia launched 250 drones and 14 ballistic missiles against Kiev, Ukraine's Air Force said, causing fires in residential buildings. It was one of the biggest combined aerial assaults on the city since the war began. The city remained under air alert for over 7 hours. The strikes followed Russia's warning of a response after a series of Ukrainian drone attacks on Russia in recent days, including on Moscow. Russia will be ready to hand Ukraine a draft document outlining conditions for a long-term peace agreement once the current prisoner exchange is completed. That's according to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Russia and Ukraine each released 390 on Friday and 307 prisoners on Saturday and said they would free more in the coming days in what is expected to be the biggest prisoner swap of the war so far. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the process would continue through the weekend. The deal to exchange 1,000 prisoners each was the only tangible outcome from face-to-face talks in Istanbul last week, marking the first direct negotiations between the two sides in over 3 years. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has downplayed the possibility of the Vatican playing a mediating role in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, calling it an inelegant solution.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has cast doubt over the Vatican as a potential location for peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. This comes after Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said that Pope Leo XIV had confirmed his willingness to host talks during a phone call. Pope Leo, the first US-born pontiff, stated soon after his election this month that the Vatican could act as a mediator in global conflicts, without specifically mentioning Russia and Ukraine. Lavrov has called the solution inelegant and says it would put the Vatican in an uncomfortable position.
Imagine the Vatican as a venue for negotiations. It would be a bit inelegant for Orthodox countries to use a Catholic platform to discuss issues on how to remove the root causes of the conflict.
Ukraine, however, has expressed openness to the notion of the Vatican as host, but Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has also suggested Turkey and Switzerland as alternative venues. The Vatican said the idea of hosting or even mediating talks, which US President Donald Trump suggested was an option, is more a hope for now than any concrete plan.
Pope Leo XIV continues his first week as pontiff with a personal touch, meeting Vatican staff and their families for the first time. The Pope also reinstated a long-dropped tradition to show his gratitude. Pope Leo XIV greeted thousands of Vatican workers and their families on Saturday, thanking them for their dedication. The meeting took place in a warm and informal atmosphere, with the Pope walking through the hall, shaking hands with children, Swiss guards and the nuns. A day earlier, he granted a €500 bonus to all staff, a gesture last seen before Pope Francis's time. On Sunday, the Pope is set to visit key Roman basilicas and meet the city's mayor. Eighteen people have been left with life-threatening injuries following a knife attack at Hamburg's Central Station on Friday evening. A 39-year-old German woman was arrested at the scene and remains in custody. Police say she is believed to have acted alone and was possibly in a state of mental distress. Authorities have ruled out any political motive at this stage. She is expected to appear in court on Saturday. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz called the attack shocking and praised the swift response of emergency services. Climate activists stormed the BNP Paribas in Paris, accusing the bank of fueling fossil fuel projects by French energy giant TotalEnergies. The protest comes amid rising investor pressure at the company's annual shareholders meeting for greater climate accountability.
Climate activists from Extinction Rebellion entered BNP Paribas Paris offices on Friday. A small group of protesters went into the building, staging their demonstration with fake banknotes and champagne before police removed them. They accused the bank of financing TotalEnergies' fossil fuel expansion. Activists criticised the company's controversial projects, calling them an environmental and human rights disaster.
TotalEnergies is the emblem of companies that are harmful from a climate point of view with absolute cynicism. We must still remember that their oil extraction project in Uganda is a disaster, but not only an environmental one.
BNP Paribas condemned the protest as aggressive, but reaffirmed its commitment to supporting the energy transition. The demonstration happened during TotalEnergies' annual shareholders meeting, where investors are demanding greater accountability on climate issues. Important issues include human rights and biodiversity related to the East African crude oil pipeline and upcoming fossil fuel projects in Mozambique and Namibia. In 2023, bank faced similar protests and criticism for its role financing the pipeline. Activists criticised BNP Paribas of arranging an $8 billion loan to TotalEnergies to support various projects across Africa. That year, environmental groups also filed a lawsuit accusing the bank of worsening the climate crisis. Since then, BNP Paribas has pledged to stop investing in new oil and gas bonds, but critics say this is not enough. Activists vow to continue their fight, demanding banks cut ties with fossil fuels entirely to protect the planet's future.
The U.S. Justice Department has reached a deal with Boeing over the two deadly 737 MAX crashes that killed 346 people. The agreement, which allows Boeing to avoid criminal prosecution, has sparked outrage among many families of the victims. The U.S. Department of Justice announced on Friday that it has struck a deal in principle with Boeing, allowing the company to avoid prosecution for fraud charges related to the two fatal 737 MAX crashes. The crashes, which occurred in Indonesia in 2018 and Ethiopia in 2019, resulted in the death of 346 people. Under the terms of the agreement, Boeing will not be branded as a convicted felon, a decision that has been met with sharp criticism from victims' families and some lawmakers. Many had called for the company to face trial and be held fully accountable in court. Paul Castle, an attorney representing numerous victims' families, expressed strong opposition to the agreement. He described it as unprecedented and obviously wrong, given the scale of what he referred to as the deadliest corporate crime in U.S. history. Castle said his clients intend to object and will attempt to convince the court to reject the deal. As part of the agreement, Boeing has consented to pay an additional $444.5 million into a fund for crash victims. This is in addition to $343.6 million fine.
The total payout will exceed $1.1 billion and includes over $455 million earmarked for improving Boeing's compliance, safety and quality programs. Despite a backlash, the Justice Department stated that family members and legal representatives for more than 110 crash victims either support the agreement, support settlement efforts without a trial, or do not oppose the deal. The U.S. Department of Justice also confirmed that Boeing will no longer be subject to oversight by an independent monitor under this new arrangement. The final written agreement is expected to be filed in court by the end of next week. The aftermath of days of heavy rainfall in New South Wales has left parts of Australia devastated, with the death toll now at 5.
Australia is grappling with the devastating aftermath of severe flooding across the state of New South Wales, following 3 days of relentless rainfall. Damage assessments are underway after the floods cut off towns, swept away livestock and destroyed homes. Officials have estimated that at least 10,000 properties may have been damaged. Manning Support Services, a non-profit that provides aid to families, says it's lost everything to the floods and finds the situation difficult to navigate.
We did have the large flood in 2021, but it didn't come anywhere near our other offices, so we were taken by surprise completely. We've lost everything in those premises. Completely unexpected for us. We knew it was going to be bad. We had no idea that it was going to be this bad. It's very difficult because we've obviously lost not just this place, but we've lost a couple of locations. So we need to get together with the team and work out where we can move staff, where we can move the services, and just go from there next week, I suppose.
On the mid-north coast, floodwaters submerged streets, intersections and even cars, rising above windshields in some areas after rivers broke their banks. Australia has been hit with more extreme weather events that some experts say are the result of climate change. At their peak, the floods isolated around 50,000 people. So far, at least 5 lives have been lost.
The United Nations warns that the aid reaching Gaza is nowhere near enough. Secretary General Antonio Guterres says Israel is allowing only a teaspoon of help when a flood is urgently needed.
The UN chief says the people of Gaza are living through what may be the most brutal stage of the conflict, with life-saving aid barely trickling in. Despite Israel recently lifting part of its blockade and allowing some 300 trucks through, only about a third of those supplies have made it into warehouses, stopped by insecurity and chaotic conditions on the ground.
All the aid authorized until now amounts to a teaspoon of aid when a flood of assistance is required. Other essentials, including fuel, shelter, cooking gas and water purification supplies, are prohibited.
Chaos erupted Thursday night when a UN food convoy escorted by Hamas was ambushed and looted. Israeli drones then struck the area, killing 6 Hamas officers. Israel says it was targeting armed threats, not the aid itself. The UN refuses to join the new US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, saying it lacks neutrality.
The United Nations has been clear. We will not take part in any scheme that fails to respect international law and the humanitarian principles of humanity, impartiality, independence and neutrality. And we have been equally clear about what is needed: a permanent ceasefire, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, and full humanitarian access.
According to the UN Secretary-General, more than 160,000 pallets of aid, enough to fill 9,000 trucks, remain stuck, while Gaza edges closer to famine.
The Baltic countries are already openly opposed to the Georgian people. This was stated by the chairman of the Parliament of Georgia, Shalva Papuashvili. According to him, on the path of integration into the European Union, Georgia faces 2 approaches: a technical issue based on a factual and objective assessment and politically motivated pressure. According to official documents from the European Commission and other international organizations, Georgia is ahead of many other candidates, including Ukraine, Moldova and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Nevertheless, the biased attitude towards Georgia continues, Papuashvili said. Georgia's relationship with the European Union is under fresh strain following a series of political and diplomatic flashpoints. As tensions escalate, the stakes are becoming higher. Our correspondent Nini Nikolashvili brings more from Tbilisi.
Relationship between Georgia and the European Union have grown increasingly strained after the tense week in Tbilisi. Opposition leader Dr George was arrested in court on Thursday, the days after an EU mission diplomat was denied to entry into the country. Those moves raised concerns in Brussels about Georgia's political direction. Critics accused the ruling Georgian Dream Party of moving away from democratic norms, with one EU lawmaker comparing Georgia's trajectory to that of Belarus. The government, however, pushed back. Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze accused the EU ambassador Pavel Herchinsky of being influenced by political forces hostile to Georgia's leadership. The EU rejected those claims. Foreign Affairs spokesperson Anita Hipper called these accusations completely unfounded and warned that they damage Georgia's EU membership prospects. Amid growing unease, some European officials are calling for the targeted sanctions against Georgian Dream's influential figures, including former Prime Minister Bidzina Ivanishvili. Now the EU is weighing its next step as tensions continue to rise. It's Nini Nikolashvili reporting from Tbilisi, AnewZ.
Armenia will host the European Political Community Summit in 2026, followed by Azerbaijan in 2028. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan announced it on his X account and added that Armenia and Azerbaijan have mutually backed each other's bids to host the summit. The mutual support highlights a notable step towards cooperation between the two neighbors within the framework of the regional forum. To explore what this means for peace prospects, regional integration and the future of European engagement in the Caucasus, I'm joined by Dr. George Mitchlish, Associate Professor at the European University in Tbilisi. Mr. Mitchlish, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So let's begin with the symbolic significance. How meaningful is this mutual support between Armenia and Azerbaijan in the context of their troubled past?
Well, I believe that every step, every attempt to bring the parties together should be welcome. European political community is a relatively new platform, but it has already proven its importance, certain influence, and I think that it will become a meaningful part of the European, I would say, political landscape. So the fact that both countries, with this interim of 2 years, will be hosting this summit, I think it will give hope. Obviously, this is a step forward compared to the Minsk group, which was extremely biased, and any other formats which could be found wanting in many regards. So this is a pan-European platform. Many European countries who have stakes in having South Caucasus peaceful and stable will be participating. I believe it should be welcome. Of course, I will be cautiously optimistic because some time should pass. Domestic situations in the country also, in particular in Armenia, which has election in about a year, will influence the outcome. But by itself, this is a positive initiative.
So hosting the EPC summit implies a degree of trust and coordination. What message does this send to European partners and regional observers?
Well, we saw recently that the countries still don't have the relations, but there are some positive signs in the interaction between the leaders of the countries. Again, this latest EPC summit, political community summit, showed that there is a will for now, and there is a window of opportunity for the countries to come closer and leave that terrible conflict behind. So I think every such initiative should be welcome, including the forthcoming 2 summits in Yerevan and Baku.
Mr. Mitchlish, could this cooperation within the EPC framework translate into broader multilateral engagement in the South Caucasus, possibly even creating new diplomatic platforms?
EPC, it lacks the binding power in that particular regard, but there is a manifestation of the significant political will on the part of Europe. I believe that since it is multilateral, there is a significant cause for optimism that this platform should be impartial. And things, if both sides trust this platform, I think this is a way forward.
In your opinion, how should the European Union interpret and respond to this moment? What role can it realistically play in sustaining this positive momentum?
Well, European Union is a narrow organization. Well, many EPC countries are also members of the European Union. I do see the contradiction. It is a larger platform which includes the country which is not part of the European Union, but strive to have closer relations. So I think that the financial and political wherewithal of European Union could only boost if there is, of course, the significant political will and stakes in having the region peaceful. It could strengthen the institutional capacity of EPC.
George Mitchlish, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your insights on this important and potentially hopeful development in the South Caucasus. Former Armenian President Serge Sargsyan faces new bribery charges stemming from a 2008 incident. He is accused of accepting approximately $2.9 million from businesswoman Silva Hambarzumyan to facilitate a business transaction. At the time, Sargsyan was serving as prime minister, and his son-in-law, Mikhail Mikasyan, is also implicated in the case. This case adds to Sargsyan's ongoing legal challenges, including a retrial in an embezzlement case after his 2024 acquittal was overturned. Sargsyan denies all allegations, asserting they are politically motivated. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met with Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara in Istanbul on Saturday. The leaders discussed the Syria reconstruction process and regional security issues. The Syrian delegation also included the ministers of foreign affairs and defense, as well as the head of the intelligence agency. The skies above Turkey's Konya were filled with action as the Anatolian Phoenix International Search and Rescue exercise wrapped up. Held from May 12th to the 23rd, the exercise brought together military forces from Turkey and 9 other nations in a powerful display of joint readiness and multinational collaboration.
Anatolian Phoenix 2025 International Search and Rescue exercise hosted by the 3rd Main Jet Base Command in Turkey's Konya has wrapped up. Military personnel from Turkey, the United States, Germany, Azerbaijan, Italy, Qatar, Poland, Romania, Slovakia and Saudi Arabia took part in this year's Anatolian Phoenix exercise aimed at enhancing coordination and interoperability in multinational operations. Within the exercise framework, complex scenarios were successfully executed, including search and rescue missions, coordinated airstrikes and joint operation drills designed to test the readiness and rapid response capabilities of all involved forces. On Visitors' Day, media representatives and official guests were welcomed to observe the exercise up close. Attendees received statistical insights and watched a specially prepared video highlighting key moments from the multinational operation. Guests then moved to the training range, where participants demonstrated various operational episodes in real time, showcasing the skills and synergy of the participating units. Capping off the event, the Turkish Stars, the Turkish Air Force's elite aerobatic team, delivered a stunning aerial performance, drawing applause from all corners of the international audience. Notably, the Azerbaijan Air Force stood out with their professionalism and precision, earning praise for their performance during the exercise. Anatolian Phoenix 2025 once again underlined the importance of unity in crisis response and the value of sustained multinational cooperation.
Concerns are growing in Kyrgyzstan over possible protests tied to debates about the state language. The trigger was a draft law discussed in parliament aimed at expanding the use of Kyrgyz language. Lawmakers are proposing to strengthen the role of the Kyrgyz language in both state institutions and public life. Our Fariza Kalimurzina has more from Almaty.
A heated Heated debate took place in the Kyrgyz parliament over a proposal to require candidates for deputy positions and civil servants to demonstrate proficiency in the Kyrgyz language. Some deputies warned that such a requirement could threaten inter-ethnic harmony. Others argued that every citizen of Kyrgyzstan should know the state language. The proposed amendments would set mandatory Kyrgyz language proficiency levels for officials and parliamentarians, introduce language exams in schools, and impose requirements on advertising and media content. The government will define the exact language standards. Deputy Janibek Kadikpaev believes the situation is not severe enough to justify strict restrictions. He emphasized that Bishkek should not be the only benchmark and that regional language realities must be taken into account. In contrast, Deputy Kunduzbek Suleymanov assured that the draft does not limit the use of Russian, and knowing Kyrgyz is simply an additional requirement for government candidates. Despite differing opinions, the draft passed its first reading. The bill also proposes amending the television and radio broadcasting law to require at least 60% of broadcast content to be in Kyrgyz. Violations would lead to warnings and fines. Just to recap, Kyrgyz is the state language of Kyrgyzstan, while Russian has held official status since 2004. It used to be the second state language. Given the country's diverse population, more than 80 ethnic groups, the language issue remains sensitive. The reduced status of Russian reflects efforts to promote and develop Kyrgyz. Fariza Kalimurzina, AnewZ, in Almaty, Kazakhstan.
Well, that's all we have for now from Baku. Stay tuned to AnewZ for more updates and have a wonderful day.